Jefferson Bible, also known as the Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth. It's Thomas Jefferson's take on Jesus as a teacher and a moral exemplar. Jefferson, being a product of the Enlightenment, was a man who valued science and reason and a belief in objective evidence. So discounting all that ran counter to what he believed was possible, everything that offended his Enlightenment sensibilities, our third president painstakingly combed through the Gospels with a razor, cutting out all of the miracle stories attributed to Jesus and most references to the supernatural, including the resurrection. When we began this sermon series on signs and miracles last week, I couldn't help but recall Jefferson's efforts, in part because I know that such talk of supernatural wonders provokes skepticism in at least some people like us, and for some really good reasons. Not least of them having to do with too many miracles that were prayed for not coming to pass. A sermon or two on Jesus' miracles, fine, but a whole series? What are we trying to accomplish with this anyway? Well, to lay my cards on the table, at least part of what we're trying to do is to help us to approach the divine as one who does work wonders, who can still surprise us. And not only in the physical realm, which is what so many of the miracle stories are about on their face, but also in the realm of the emotional and the spiritual. The God Jesus came to embody for us can also make things possible that we thought could never happen in the realm of relationships, the world of the soul and the psyche. We'll be looking for God's wondrous activity and divinely inspired steps towards new possibilities, and in the day-to-day serendipities of life that we may fail to notice or simply write off as coincidences, although we might better call them God incidences. Hopefully, we'll also not avoid the hard questions. What happens when prayers aren't answered, when people don't get well? In the weeks ahead, let me invite you to sit with the words of the late Mary Oliver from her poem, The World I Live In. I have refused to live locked in the orderly house of reasons and proofs. The world I live in and believe in is wider than that. And anyway, what's wrong with maybe? You wouldn't believe what once or twice I have seen. I'll just tell you this. Only if there are angels in your head will you ever possibly see one. Now that is not a very Jeffersonian approach to life. Not surprisingly, the miracle of Jesus changing water into wine at Cana did not make the cut for Jefferson's Bible. It remains a challenge to those of us who spend at least some of our lives locked in the orderly house of reasons and proofs, and I think that's most of us actually. But there it stands, right at the beginning of John's Gospel, the first of Jesus' signs in that book. I think John puts it there for more than one purpose. One reason is surely because the metaphor of the wedding banquet is a favorite image that Jesus uses to describe God's kingdom. In the Synoptic Gospels, he tells parables about wedding banquets where people are invited and do not come, and the lame and the halt and the blind are invited in their stead. He talks about wedding banquets where guests need to be wearing the proper garments or they get tossed out on their ear, and where bridesmaids need to have oil for their lamps for the procession to the wedding. He gives instructions about the proper place that you should go when you attend of such a banquet, going not to the head of the table, but to the far seat. When Jesus is accused of being a glutton and a wine-bibber because he and his disciples are eating and drinking and making merry, Jesus says the wedding guests cannot fast when the bridegroom is with them. For John's Gospel to put the changing of water into wine at a wedding as Jesus' first miracle is to set Jesus' whole ministry in the context of that banquet image of what his parables say that life together in God looks like. It's like a joyous feast where all are invited. Some are too busy or bothered or resentful to come. It's a feast founded by a man who spoke of God's heart for the poor and the outcast, the blind and the lame, the widow and the orphan, and called us to embody that sort of love in our lives. It's a love that sees beyond ourselves and reaches out to address the pain and need of others. But I think John puts this miracle in the front of his gospel for a few other reasons too. I believe John does it to say that the God we know in Jesus cares about things like wedding feasts in our day-to-day lives. I think John's gospel also does this to name the truth that just like the literal wine ran out at that party, sometimes the spiritual wine of joy and love and faith runs out in our lives or the lives of others we know. It happens far too frequently. I'm not sure whether the people who attended the wedding banquet of which John speaks would say that they were locked in the orderly house of reasons and proofs. What the text does say is that they had run out of wine. And that at least one person, Mary, the mother of Jesus, noticed. We don't know whether news of the wine shortage had filtered out to the rest of those in attendance or not, or whether people hadn't quite become aware that the wine had stopped flowing. But Mary noticed. And she brought that issue to her son, who told her, "Woman, what does that have to do with you and me? My hour has not yet come." Now that's troubling on a number of levels, the first of which is that Jesus calls his mother woman. If I had been Joseph and I were there, I might have responded with what I told my daughters when they were younger and spoke in a sassy way to their mother. "Who are you talking to?" Then treat her that way. Commentators say that this was a bit of an unusual way to address his mother, and Jesus does the same thing at the cross, by the way. But scholars hypothesize that him calling Mary woman was to emphasize that for Jesus, the notion of family went beyond the biological, and in calling her woman, made it clear that all people were part of his family. Second problem is that Jesus says, this is not our issue. We who would like to think that God cares about our daily problems and the problems of others are a bit scandalized by this, at least I am. So it's worth noting that at least in this instance, Jesus actually does do something in response to a problem that he's made aware of. Then he follows up with, "My hour has not yet come." I think that's Jesus' way of saying, if I do something like this, if I change water into wine, people will likely misunderstand. They'll think of it as kind of a magic act, a parlor trick. It will interfere with their ability to get my larger mission. It was as if Jesus wanted to control the narrative. Are you familiar with that concept, controlling the narrative? He wanted to control the narrative because he believed that his hearers would not be able to comprehend the meaning of his miracle until his hour had come. In John's Gospel, Jesus' hour is the hour that he's hanging on the cross. It's only in light of that, in light of self-giving love, that the transformation of water into wine can rightly be understood. Jesus said, "My hour has not yet come," but Mary didn't take no for an answer. She told the servants to do whatever Jesus commanded them, and they filled the stone water jars with water for purification. When the wine steward took a sip, he said, "You've saved the good wine till last." Most everybody serves the good stuff first, and then pulls out the Glen Ellen when everyone is drunk. But you've saved the good wine until now. Before we go any further, let me add that this is not really a story about alcohol. It's a story about love and joy and faith. Sometimes the miracle, and it is a miracle, is that the wine or the craving for it gets turned into sparkling water. And sometimes the miracle is that people notice a situation of scarcity and they respond in ways that bring abundance. I've seen that sort of thing happen all the time, where lack or the perception of it turns into provision. And the only way I can explain it is the Spirit and activity of God. Shin is here. It was great to be reminded again that Emmanuel was the first place that you came to find funding to launch Students Helping Honduras, your ministry to the children there. You saw what was happening with the children in Honduras. You saw the problems of violence and poverty and lack of education, and you said, I have to make a difference. And that led to the building of a school, and now 50 schools. And this year it'll be 54 schools, maybe 55 schools. And I wouldn't put it past you or past God, Shin, for you to realize your dream of building 1,000 schools in Honduras. Because I believe in a God who, sometimes at least, takes the water and turns it into wine. Maybe you read in the paper about Candace Payne, the 34-year-old Chicago woman who knew about the makeshift tent city for people experiencing homelessness out in Second City, and how the propane tank that was supplying heat for it blew up. And she started a campaign as the temperatures dipped below zero in Chicago to provide hotel rooms for all of those men and women who lived in that tent city. Most of the people who responded to her campaign were under the age of 40. They managed to raise enough money to get 100 individuals experiencing homelessness into hotel rooms until the weather turned warm enough that they could go outside again. I believe in a God who sometimes, at least, turns water into wine. Think about John Shell and the Fastings program and the week-in, week-out commitment that John has to move sleeping mats from one church to the next every Sunday through the winter season so that men and women experiencing homelessness might have a place to lay their heads. And his commitment to doing that preceded our involvement here by years. When I look at that, I see John transforming the water of his baptism into the wine of service. We had a wedding shower here in this place yesterday for Billy Klutz and Stephen Langerman. As they look forward to their big wedding celebration, I think about how much Billy has blessed this community.
Amen. Amen.
His gifts and his talents. And how he and Stephen feel loved and welcomed here. And that we celebrate them in their relationship. What a joy the wedding is going to be. I believe in a God who sometimes, at least, turns water into wine. And I believe in a God who sometimes turns wine into sparkling water. You know, for me, sharing back in August, when I received my 18-month chip, that I'm a part of the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, for me, sharing last Sunday, during celebrations and concerns, that I was going to be receiving my 2-year chip this week. I did. I got it several places. I was in Ocean City on a retreat and picked up a chip there. You can't ever get too many chips. Received one at the meeting on Wednesday. Then my sponsor came up from Fredericksburg to attend. He made a special trip to give me my chip. At that same meeting, another one of my good friends in the program spoke. And he talked about how at one point, after about 7 or 8 years of sobriety, he decided it was time for him to go back to the church. He went back to the particular denomination that he'd been a part of, and he talked to the priest about his desire to re-engage faith in the church setting. And the priest said, "The church is not ready for you." It crushed him. It crushed his spirit. In a day or two, he turned to another good friend in the program, a man who happened to be a pastor, actually, and he said, I'm having a hard time really believing that God loves me. His friend told him, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pray and ask God for a sign to prove that God loves you. Don't try to tell God what the sign should be. Just be ready to receive it. My friend said that he got his sign the next day. I still don't know what that sign was, and he didn't share it with us. But after the meeting this week, I pulled out my phone and I texted my friend. Here's what I wrote. I wrote, I just want you to know that you are a sign from God to me. You are proof that God loves me. In Jesus' name.